Oh, I hate this so much. All right, hello to my EN 100 students. We had our first ever campfire session, our campfire Q&A last night. Reasonably well attended, maybe a little bit better than I expected in terms of number of you that showed up for that. Again, that's not mandatory. You just show up if you want to, get an instructor check-in point. But I wanted to touch base with you because I'm sensing some frequently asked questions. Some of you feel a little adrift, particularly when it comes to the vocabulary. So this is just going to be a short one-off in which I can talk you through the grab bag assignments. A lot of you, it seems like, are confused about what those are and how they factor in your grade. So I just want to review that. I'm going to go over every single vocab term that you should know up to this point with a couple from a couple of weeks coming, right? So you'll have some advanced notice about vocab. And I'm just going to try to keep it simple. Here is the actual vocab with a flashcard definition because some of you are getting antsy about the quiz. I was hoping you'd be using context clues and kind of growing your own definition of terms over time. That's a little too squishy. We need a little bit more concrete. So I'll give you basic, straightforward definitions for all the vocab that you should know up to this point. And I'm already sensing you forming three groups, kind of a triage of students. So I want to talk about those three groups and make some recommendations for the group of you that are clearly already heading towards an A. I can tell the rest of you what those students are doing in case you want to try to take on some of those habits. All right, here we go. Okay, first off, the grab bag assignments. Wanted to clarify what those are so you have a better sense of how they fit into your grade. Worst case scenario, they're going to be up by Monday, or at least a handful of them are going to be up by Monday. Might get some in today. It's the weekend. I'm lacking minutes in the day to carve out. But worst case scenario, by Monday you can start looking over the grab bag assignments. I'm figuring out that a couple of you, or a subset of you, are thinking of these as kind of like extra credit. They're definitely not. They are credit counted towards whatever grade you're shooting for. So if you contracted for the C, you have to do 5 of the grab bag assignments to get to the C. That's not extra credit, that's essential credit, part of your grade. If you're going for the B, you got to do 10 grab bag assignments. Going for the A, you should be doing no less than 15 grab bag assignments. The way they're stacked is that if you're only doing 5, you're probably going to pick the easiest ones, and that makes sense if you're going for a C. And then as you do progressively more, you pick and choose the assignments that seem right for you or seem like they're going to help on the essay. They're going to get progressively harder. You just will run out of the easiest ones to choose from. So if you have to do 15 for the A, by definition, you'll be dipping into some of the longer or more challenging assignments. So keep that in mind. They're not extra credit. Depending on your grade contract, they are just part of your actual credit. All right. Full vocab roundup. I'm going over every single vocab term that you should know at this point in the semester with a couple from weeks upcoming. I started with text. If you did the exercise kind of built into the syllabus, if you watch the syllabus video, dry as it is, I tried to make a case for why that's a foundational term in the class. But for the quiz, make sure you at least know the 2 main attributes of what makes a text a text. It is made by humans. I originally said man-made, but I'm trying to boost my political correctness points slightly. And it has to communicate an idea. Almost by definition, if it's made by humans, it probably will communicate an idea. So in other words, if it's man-made, that one by itself pretty much gets you there. It's probably a text if it was made by a human. So it has to be made by humans, has to communicate an idea, which it almost certainly does. That's it. For the quiz, you just have to remember those 2 basic attributes. Later in the course, I want to get into why that's important because we're swimming in text all the time. Your ability to read text carefully, critically, and thoughtfully, anything from Geico commercials to fake news to the ambiguous text that your friend zone person gave you at 2 o'clock in the morning, all those qualify as text and all of them can be read. They can be read for deeper meaning. So I'm coming back to that term in more gruesome detail, but for now, if it's made by humans, communicates an idea, that's all you need to know for text. Narrative, I'm putting a lot of pressure on that term too, but for now, as long as you know, it's a story that has an objective. This could be anything from your grandmother takes you out with some iced tea out to the porch. You're going to do some porch setting with grandma, and you can feel her winding up for a story about her childhood when everyone was more respectful and everyone knew how to treat their elders, and people were much more responsible and moral when she was a kid. that clearly is a narrative. It is a story, and it's got at least two objectives. One is she's nostalgically reliving the past. That's one part of the objective. And she's probably also trying to make you feel guilty about the kind of life that you're living in these times. So that certainly would qualify as a narrative. Grandma taking you out, telling you a story about her childhood. Anytime a politician winds up to tell you about where they came from and why they're qualified, for it to be narrative, it doesn't have to be true. So politicians will often base entire stories with the objective of seeming more appealing to the voting population. Most advertising is also a narrative. So if you see advertising that engages in storytelling to try to persuade you to buy something, that qualifies as narrative as well. For this first essay, you will be writing in a narrative format. You'll be telling stories about yourself and trying to be as nuanced, specific, and concrete in the development of those narratives. But the first essay is essentially you telling a story with the point of demonstrating some metacognitive analytical analysis and also trying to be cohesive. You tell a story that makes sense and doesn't digress or get off topic. Next, we got a trickier one because I'm using this in this class a little differently than definitions you might find online. So add something, not just the definition, the metacognitive approach, but in your notes say something like the metacognitive approach to writing in particular, because that's kind of a foundational principle of the way I teach writing at the cognitive level. So you have to know how I'm using the term. For the quiz, for the flashcard, if you only wrote down thinking about thinking, you'd basically be there. You'd know enough to get the correct multiple choice answer to that question. But I would want you to immediately add something like trying to hack your own brain to achieve more objectivity or to achieve critical thinking. Really simple example. I tend to come home from department meetings or Senate meetings. I'm a college senator. I tend to come home very angry from these meetings because I have a distrust, a distaste, bordering on hatred, bordering on mania of bureaucracies, business meetings, anything where people in suits are sounding self-important and telling you what you need to do to change your behavior as if they're not the ones at the top making the decisions. I'd say when I come home from one of those meetings, I'm at risk because if there's a box of donuts when I get home, I'm gonna eat the entire box of donuts. If I didn't think about it, I'd just say, well, I got a donut problem, so I have to go on a diet. The metacognitive approach would be you stop, you step back, and you say, wait a minute, I see a connection here. I'm thinking about my own thinking and my own habits, and I know, and this is actually true for me, that anytime I have a department meeting, I can't have donuts in the house because I will eat all the donuts through stress eating and through anger eating. So that's me trying to step back, be a little bit more objective about my own understanding of the world and how I interact with the world. That could be helpful in your studies if you metacognitively realize you have good or bad habits that help or hurt your academic life, right? You decide when you're going to study, how you're going to study. Should you have your smartphone near you, or should you turn off all notifications from this hour to that hour? That would qualify as the metacognitive approach towards your study habits. So that's a good application of the term. In writing, what that will look like is you have a knee-jerk reaction. Let's say we're not going to go heavily into politics, but hypothetically, if you wanted to, you certainly could talk politics. And you have a very strong emotional reaction to the protests or to the riots, and we'll talk about word choice and how important that is eventually. But if you have a knee-jerk emotional reactions to the protests and rioting going on out west right now, the growing civil unrest related to Black Lives Matter, police enforcement, police brutality, whatever that emotional reaction is, it could be right, you could be accurate, but if the emotion happens first, you want to step back and become metacognitive. I wonder why I feel so strongly bordering on anger and mania when somebody brings up this political topic or somebody brings up this politician. I have a knee-jerk emotional reaction. In your writing, you don't want to get rid of that, but you want to make sure you can step out of the emotion long enough to be logical, to be consistent, and to create a nuanced argument, not just explode emotions in a angry tirade. Right? That won't be convincing anyway. You're never going to persuade somebody just by being louder than them. So the metacognitive approach ultimately gets used to enhance your arguments and to make your opinions more nuanced and intelligent. Okay, just 3 more to go here and you'll be up to date with vocab and basic definitions. This is an important one, not as much for essays, but just in terms of how you're planning your semester and how you're metacognitively trying to assess your own behavior and study habits. So the attention economy is not my term, that is an industry term. And here's the simplest way you could think of it. Your attention is literally somebody else's money. What I mean by that is most social media right now is tracking not the number of minutes that you spend on a site in a given day, like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. They're counting the number of seconds. So in other words, it's in their interest to glean as many seconds from your attention so that you're paying attention to them as much as possible, because that's literally how they make their money. They track number of seconds on site, it's called, and that translates into advertising dollars. So it's in their interest to keep you on screen as much as they possibly can. I used to be very angry and say, kids these days, the generation, nobody's got any self-control, delayed gratification, you just want that instant dopamine hit right now. And the more I researched it, and the further I got into this, and this will be in one of the lessons for week 2, there are people getting paid $500,000 a year who have been hired from psychology departments to make your applications as addictive as possible. So that's on purpose. It's really not your fault if you're borderline or in fact clinically addicted to your smartphone, which many of us are, like legally, clinically, the clinical DSM-5 diagnosis of an addiction. Some of us are that far in, and that's by design. So just being aware that the attention economy exists, I'm hoping that's reminding you that you're kind of in an arms race. You're at war with your smartphone if you use it more than you'd like to. In other words, if it's not voluntary, if you spend an hour on Spotify, you feel great about it afterwards, that's fine. That's probably good for your brain. But if you spend 6 hours on a social media site or several, and then you feel kind of gross afterwards, you feel a little guilty about having put that time towards their money versus your own education, you just want to be aware of that. That's metacognitive approach as well, being aware of how much time you spend on screen, or even engaging your phone and having it track how you spend your time on screen, doing something like reducing the number of notifications you get in a certain time period. All that would absolutely qualify as the metacognitive approach as applied to the attention economy. So keep in mind, they literally think of your seconds on their screen as money in their pocket, and you just want to be aware of that if you want to reclaim some of your own time. Okay, I can't help myself. In case that was a little too abstract or too squishy for you, you can break it down into a formula. Why should I care about the attention economy? Let me try to create an algorithmic formula to explain why this might be something that you want to keep track of. Do you agree with premise A that time is money? If you said yes, do you agree with premise B that money equals power? If you agreed with me so far, you're agreeing with my formula and you are acknowledging that the attention economy is something you want to pay attention to. If you agree with the third premise, that power is represented by things like strength, stamina, and therefore the likelihood of your success, wouldn't it stand to reason, wouldn't it just be logical that if you have an addictive, bordering on kind of toxic or obsessive relationship with the little robot in your phone, again, it's not your fault, but you want to be aware of it. If you agree that time is money, money is power, you want to have power for success and the stamina to get through it, you have to assume that if your attention span is like your stamina, your cell phone or your smartphone is actively working against you. So keep that in mind if it helps kind of motivate how you think about our relationship to technology, even though that's the actual delivery of this course. Believe me, the irony is not lost on me about that. So just 2 more vocab terms to get through, then you're fully caught up. You know kind of where I need you to be vocab-wise in the course so far. This one's going to hurt me because normally I'd spend at least a full class on these 2 terms alone, really drag out the definitions, do a lot of examples. So these definitions are very basic. I'm hoping you get a much deeper understanding of how I'm using these terms, but for now, just literal definitions. Concrete, if something is concrete, it exists in the real world. I'm putting quotes around real because we'll talk about what we know is real, or if there's such a thing as facts, or if we're all in the matrix right now and this is one big simulation and it's just us that thinks we're us, but we're all zeros and ones. Forget I even mentioned it though. For now, if it's concrete, it exists in the real world. Think about how you know if something exists in the real world. The short answer is your 5 senses. If you can see it, touch it, taste it, engage with it orally, all of that would qualify for something that exists in the real world. Examples include easy ones like a concrete brick. If that mnemonic helps remind you that a concrete brick is real, if you drop it on your toe will be broken and turned into a bloody mash. That is very real world. That's happening outside your own brain or outside your own concepts. So anything you can physically engage with. Something like air is a little tricky. Think to yourself right now, if that was a quiz question, do you think air would be concrete or abstract? You say, well, I can't see it, but you certainly can smell it. If somebody farts in the air, you are aware of it through your olfactory senses. And the completion of that thought experiment is, if somebody sucked all the air out of the room, it wouldn't matter how much you believed in the air, you'd still be dead. So air, though made up of very tiny molecules, is something you can experience in the real world with your five senses. Stick your head out a car window, your face will experientially understand that the air is real. So anything physical, anything that you can engage with the five senses counts as concrete. Obviously, the opposite of that is abstract. So the easiest symmetrical definition, so that they kind of match like a mirror, would be if it is concrete, it exists in the real world. For me, the opposite of that is if it's abstract, it exists in the mind, or it exists as a concept only. So things like love, things like democracy, even something like freedom, I would argue, is abstract, not concrete. But I'm stuck in a concrete prison cell. That seems pretty concrete to me, Vogt. I would say, well, here I am in the prison cell, alone with my thoughts and no digital technology to distract me. I'm finally free to write my novel. So I would say it's a concept. Look at me in this prison cell, protected from everybody else. I hate other people, so that prison cell might be freedom for one person, or it might be torture for somebody else. The point is that those are concepts. That's the experiential reaction to the world. That's how you feel on the inside. So ideas, concepts, feelings, all of these would qualify as abstract. The reason that's important for writing is you have to know the difference between the two. The first essay is going to require a lot of concrete description where you're being specific, nuanced, and definitive in your language. And you want to listen for abstractions. If something is too open-ended, sounds too vague or too general, overgeneralizations are actually a crime of being too abstract. So if you hear somebody make a blanket statement that covers everything in a demographic, it sounds like an overgeneralization. It's probably because the statement is too abstract. That's one of the main points for the first essay. So that's as far as I'll get into the vocab. At least at this point, we know you have basic flashcard definitions and a few hints of how these are going to be applied to the class itself. And finally, just want to close this out by talking a little bit about the A demographic. Right now, there's roughly about 3 groups of you, right? I have 125 students right now, 4 sections of the EN 100 and then 1 section of EN 101. So out of basically 125 or 126 students, I am sensing you kind of retreating to 3 separate groups. One group, about a third of you, I haven't heard from, so we should talk about that. Email me for sure. Second group, you're kind of the middle version of triage. You're doing pretty good, might be struggling a little bit, you're a little nervous about the course, but you've already submitted a contract. Maybe you've done the homework, maybe not. But you kind of have a sense that you might be able to get through the course, and you've already engaged with me. Most importantly, if you've reached out and emailed me and at least gotten me the grading contract, I'm rooting for you, and I think good things may happen in your future. And then the A demographic, there's about a third of you, and that's a lot. I think that's more than in a typical seated class. More of you might be in a pretty obvious A trajectory. And I just wanted to say what the A students look like at this point, in case you want to emulate them or you're a hungry A student and you're just trying to dial everything in for the class. Here's what it looks like. Here's the evidence that I have this subgroup, this demographic, is likely to be headed towards an A for the course overall. They've already gotten week 1 completed, and they're also getting antsy. So this demographic is a little annoyed that there isn't more material built out for week 2. I'm going as fast as I can, 27 hours a day, so I will try to populate as aggressively and as quickly as possible. But that's a good sign. If you're annoyed with me for not having given you more at this point, that bodes well for your grade. Let's be honest, that's good tidings for your future. Also, frequent exchanges with me online. So multiple emails, Some people submitted me the homework, asked my opinion first before a final submission. That counts as an instructor check-in, so that's also a good sign. And finally, just overall kind of a sensation of either open-mindedness or a willingness to kind of go along with the larger arc. So as I build this course out, obviously I'm hoping you're keeping track of the vocab. Obviously you want to try to do as well as you can on the major essays, but if you take good notes, you should see the direction I'm going with the course. You should sense why one unit follows another unit. And that's the last thing I wanted to say about the typical A student. They don't just memorize terms well, they're not just overachievers on the essays, they actually have a sense of where I'm going in the class and why I'm pursuing the arc that I'm pursuing. And feel free to ask me about that. I'll be fully transparent and kind of letting you know where we're going and why in the course. But reminding yourself of that and trying to create that sense of a journey where we're starting, where we're going to end up in the middle zone, and then what your ultimate objectives are for the semester, that's a clear indicator of an A-type student. This type of student that will get an A has a sense of the course as a larger journey, not just a series of individual isolated assignments. Hope that helps. I'm going to try to put more of these out because I could sense a hunger for them. So we'll try to have some videos. I'll try to keep the vocab as up to date and clean as possible. And we'll get through this together. All right, peace out. See you next time, guys.